Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hey, this is Jen. You're listening to the Bible for Busy People podcast. And this week we are talking about waiting on the promises of God and the ultimate promise of God, which is restoration and reconciliation. We talked about Abraham and Sarah yesterday, who were waiting on some very specific promises, like a promised land of their own, a nation of people that would come from them, and a son of their own. But what about when you don't have a promise to rely on? What if the ending is still unknown? I'm going to say it right now. It's probably absolutely bonkers of me to try to summarize Joseph's whole story in a podcast under 10 minutes, but we are going to give it a go because his story of waiting faithfully is a seriously impressive one. We're going to be hopping around in the book of Genesis, starting in chapter 37. Joseph grew up pampered and precocious and maybe a little bit arrogant. His mother was the favorite wife out of his father's 2 wives, and his father ended up buying him a special ornamental robe that caused a stir among the 12 brothers that he was part of. He had 2 dreams where his whole family ended up bowing down to him, and he wasn't quiet about it. His brothers then, hearing those things, in a bold move, planned to actually kill him as he approached them one day. Reuben talked them down, but then we're going to go ahead and read in verse 26 of Genesis 37. It says, Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of a cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there — Reuben is the oldest brother — he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So that vicious brother who decided to sell Joseph into slavery is Judah, the forefather of Jesus' lineage. It's interesting to watch him eventually get humbled, first in his own family and then before Joseph later, unbeknownst to him at the time. That's something you can go back and read later. But talk about family drama. In Genesis 39, we see that Joseph ended up working in a powerful man's house named Potiphar in Egypt for 13 years. His boss's wife started hitting on him for who knows how long, and he said no again and again, while he is being super successful and doing a great job at his job in the household. But it got so bad with the wife that she grabbed his cloak as he ran away one day, and she accused him of attacking her. Honestly, though, do you think her husband didn't know her character and her behavior? I suspect he didn't want to, but he responded how he had to socially, but who knows? Then in Genesis 39, verse 19, it says, When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners are confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. He was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. In Genesis 40, Joseph correctly interprets the dream of two servants of Pharaoh. One of them is restored to his position, one of them is killed. Here's something to notice, though, in verse 8 of Genesis 40. It says, the two servants had gone to him and said, "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Joseph learned humility in his time of slavery and uncertainty. Even though he interpreted the dream for the cupbearer to the king who went back to his position, the cupbearer forgets him for another couple years. And again, we see things in the Bible and read them in a few short chapters. We don't spend 600 plus days in a dark prison with Joseph, who continued to work faithfully despite the unfairness of his circumstances. So again, if you're counting, that's 13 years that he was serving Potiphar and then 2 more years spent in prison. How do we respond to what feels unfair in our lives? I know I can feel conflicted, indignant, frustrated, and that's a point where I can continue to work it out with God and choose faithfulness, or I can bypass it and act like it's okay when it's not, or I can grow bitter and try to do things my own way. Now, the story could have ended there in prison with Joseph spending the rest of his days there, but God arranged a reversal from the lowest place in the land to a powerful position of authority at the top. In Genesis 41, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dream, determining that God has told Pharaoh there will be 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of famine. Joseph helpfully presents an idea of setting someone in charge to plan for the upcoming years. If you recognize Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat musical, this is where he says, "Who this man can be, I just don't know." And it's pretty funny. Anyway, we'll keep going. Pharaoh hired him for the job. And then who came crawling into Egypt but Joseph's brothers, who also faced famine? Joseph questions them, he messes with their heads a little, and they didn't recognize him there. He found out that he had a younger brother named Benjamin by his same mother and that his mother had died and Jacob is still living. He accused them of being spies, locked them up for 3 days, and kept Simeon in custody until the brothers returned with Benjamin. Oh, and also Joseph hooked them up with plenty of food and secretly returned their payment for it to them. So they're overwhelmed. In chapter 43, they returned and ate with Joseph. And in 44, there's a bit more trickery involved. I'll let you go back and read it. But then he finally reveals himself in Genesis 45, where he says, "And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Again, Joseph's story is wild. He remained faithful to God through years of uncertainty, no promise that he would be released from his undeserved captivity. But we do see God walking with Joseph the whole time, blessing his work and setting everything in position for Joseph to end up in authority in Egypt to save the family who tried to get rid of him. We all go through seasons of darkness and sometimes even times when we're not believed, not supported, maybe even accused. Our lives could be at risk, our families broken, our circumstances unstable. But God goes alongside us. You'll notice we don't hear God's words a lot in Joseph's story. I'm not sure if he heard God or not in that time, but I can picture Joseph in communion with God as he went about his work faithfully. God was busy also transforming his brothers' hearts. God was transforming his own heart from proud to humbled. How can we find God working in our lives when hope feels lost?
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.